before a business fails, there are usually advanced signals or advanced signs of failure. So the business may look okay. You may not have any reason to panic. There may not be a crisis. There may not be a problem. But if you look at the vital signs, you will know that there is a crisis on the horizon, that something is going to happen to this business. It always happens in every business. The vital signs will show if something is wrong with the business or if the business is healthy. But the problem is, if you don't know how to measure the vital signs in a business, you may be taken by surprise. Maybe one day your business is okay, the next day your business crashes, and then you say something like it took you by surprise. It happened all of a sudden. It's very unlikely that a business will get into trouble all of a sudden. There is no such thing as all of a sudden. Every big thing starts small. It's a natural law. Every big multinational corporation was once a small business. Welcome to the Small Starter Business Podcast, a unique podcast for practical tips and advice to help you start, grow, or turn around your business. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Small Starter Business Podcast. I am your host, as usual, John Paul Iwoha. Today, we have another interesting episode, and I'm going to be talking about something that digs at the heart of any entrepreneur who has worked hard to build a business or to start a business, and for some reason, they cannot be available in that business. Because, if you've listened to previous episodes of this podcast, from time to time, I mention that some people who are entrepreneurs, who love the lifestyle, who love the responsibility, who love the passion of being an entrepreneur, unwittingly, what they create is a job for themselves, not actually a business, right? So they end up creating a job and not a business. And then in the process of trying to create a business, there's a chance that you may be away from your business from time to time, which is why today's episode of the podcast is very important. In fact, I tagged the title of this episode, Vital Signs, right? So it's called Vital Signs, how to make sure your business runs well when you're not around. And there are several different reasons why an entrepreneur may not be around their business for maybe a few hours, a few days, a few weeks, or even a few months or a few years, right? And if I had to fathom, such reasons, some possible reasons could be that you have a business that is a side business, and then that business cannot get your full attention because maybe you're still keeping your day job. Maybe you are a lawyer, you're a doctor, you're a civil servant, but for some reason, whatever that reason is, may likely be a personal reason, you prefer to keep your job and run the business on the side. And there's nothing wrong with that. The only challenge is that you will not give the business your full attention. And it's likely that you may need the business to run while you're not around. So this is a common situation where somebody has a business, they love the business, but they cannot be around to give that business their full attention. Another reason could be that you have two or more businesses, or maybe you have just one business, but you have different branches or different locations for the business. Maybe you have a branch in one city and then you have another branch in another city, or maybe you have 3 branches, 7 branches, 10 branches. It could be some retail chain, a supermarket chain, retail outlets, right? So you have different locations. And by virtue of having different locations, you just cannot be in all the locations at the same time, right? You cannot be in 2 of your branches at the same time. You cannot be everywhere at the same time. So what that means is that some of your locations, some of your branches, some of your businesses may have to run without you, So in essence, what this episode is talking about is how can you be sure that the business is running well even when you're not around? Another common case could be that maybe you just have one business in one location, but for some reason you have to be temporarily unavailable. You have to be away from the business. It could be because you need to travel. For some people, they need to study. Maybe you're traveling overseas or to another city to go study, or maybe you're going on vacation, or you need to make out time for family, maybe something very important, and you need to take leave for a few days or a few weeks. away from the business, or it could be some other commitments. But bottom line is, you're not going to be available in the business for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. So how can you be sure that in your absence, that things are running well? That's exactly what this episode is going to focus on. And I'm hoping that by the time you finish listening to this episode, you're going to learn quite a couple of interesting things and interesting strategies that you can use to keep tabs on your business, even when you're absent, even when you're unavailable. And there's a reason why I chose that title, Vital Signs, right? So anybody who works in the healthcare industry or who is familiar with the healthcare industry would be familiar with the term vital signs. And what vital signs means is that if you remember the last time you went to a hospital, maybe you went there to see a doctor, but it's unlikely that the first person you meet will be a doctor. Now, before you see the doctor, something interesting is going to happen. One of the nurses is going to ask you into some space, and they will ask to take your vital signs. It's a very simple procedure. Vital signs. What are they looking for? They are going to take your temperature. They are going to put some thermometer either in your mouth or in your armpits to get your temperature. They are going to measure your blood pressure. They will ask you to step on the weight so that they get a sense of your weight. Essentially, what these things mean is that they're looking for vital signs. And vital signs are important because the body will usually give a sign before something goes terribly wrong. So sometimes something may be wrong, but you may be healthy, you may be okay, and you may not know. One of those common ones may be that your blood pressure may be very high, and you may just not know. They call it a silent killer. You may not know. So for that person needs to get urgent medical attention. But to them, they are okay, they are fine, they are healthy, there's nothing wrong with them. But what the vital sign is showing is that something is terribly wrong with this person. Or maybe you develop a high temperature, right? That's a vital sign. The body is trying to tell you that something is wrong. And it manifests this through a high temperature, right? And then, of course, if you are overweight, or if your weight is high, for the doctor, that is something to be careful about, because when you are obese, it can lead to other things, right? So that's why the vital signs are important, because it tells the doctor, it gives the doctor initial red flags. It draws the doctor's attention to important things they need to pay attention to. Because when you show up at the hospital, most times the doctor has to find out what exactly is wrong with you. And they tend to rely a whole lot on the vital signs. And then when they check your vital signs, the very next step will be to do some tests. They might take a blood sample, a urine sample, a stool sample, and do all sorts of tests. So these are vital signs that let them understand how well is your body, what is wrong, and if something is wrong, where exactly is that problem? So it's exactly the same thing with a business. Before a business fails, there are usually advanced signals or advanced signs of failure. So the business may look okay. You may not have any reason to panic. There may not be a crisis. There may not be a problem. But if you look at the vital signs, you will know that there is a crisis on the horizon, that something is going to happen to this business. It always happens in every business. The vital signs will show if something is wrong with the business or if the business is healthy. But the problem is, if you don't know how to measure the vital signs in a business, you may be taken by surprise. Maybe one day your business is okay, the next day your business crashes. And then you say something like it took you by surprise. It happened all of a sudden. It's very unlikely that a business will get into trouble all of a sudden. There is no such thing as all of a sudden. There are usually advanced signs. The only thing is that you may not see them because you don't know what they are. And when you don't know what you're looking for, you may never be able to take the benefit from that. So I'm going to touch on these very important points. And what these things are would be some kind of, you know what they say, prevention is better than cure. It's easier, it is better, it is cheaper to save a business before it collapses. If you wait until there is a crisis or until the business collapses, it becomes more expensive, it becomes more inconvenient, it becomes much more risky to actually save that business. So that's why you need to pay close attention to the things I'm going to be talking about in this episode. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about a framework. I'm going to be talking about 5 important steps you can take to understand the vital signs of your business and how you can take action, especially when you're not around, especially when you're running your business from a distance or you're depending on somebody else to run the business. It could be a co-founder, it could be a business partner, it could be your manager, it could be that you've hired a manager to run the business. It could be your employees. But bottom line is, you are not running the business directly. You are away somewhere. You don't have direct access to the business. How do you make sure that things are okay? How do you make sure that your business is healthy? How do you make sure that you can catch the early warning signs before your business goes into crisis mode, right? So, like I said, there are 5 steps I'm going to talk you through. The very first step is to establish a baseline. Establish a baseline. Now, what exactly is a baseline? A baseline is the normal health of your business. The normal health of your business. And if I go back to that analogy I talked about the human body having vital signs, right? There is a normal temperature for the body. At that temperature, there is no cause for alarm. You are healthy, you are fine. But if anything happens to that temperature, maybe the temperature drops or the temperature rises above the normal range, then you know that there's trouble. The same thing with blood pressure. There is an acceptable normal range for blood pressure for a healthy person. If the blood pressure drops below or above that range, then there is cause for concern. The same thing with weight. Within a certain range, you have a normal weight. But if you're above that weight, you are considered obese or overweight. If you're under that weight, you are considered underweight, right? So there is a normal, healthy range, and the same thing happens for a business. Every business has a baseline, but the problem is many people who run their businesses don't even know what their baseline is. So if you don't know what your baseline is, how can you know when something goes wrong? Because there is nothing to compare that against. So that's why a baseline is important, because without a baseline, there is no basis for comparison. Now, but how do you set up a baseline, right? So let me give you a couple of ideas or examples. Some of these things may not be new to you. It's just that you've not really thought about them as being a baseline. But a baseline is always important. And before you can even take vital signs of your business or make any use of the vital signs or be able to understand them or apply them, you need to know what your baseline is. Now, there are a couple of ways you can establish a baseline. One of the most common ways to establish a baseline is the historical performance of your business. So I'll give you an example. You've been in business for 2-3 years, right? You've been running the business directly. So you know what a typical day would be in terms of sales. So maybe based on your historical performance, on a normal day, you expect to make between maybe $1,000 to $3,000 in sales. That's your average day. That's, given the history of the business, given the performance of the business, if you make between $1,000 and $3,000, that's normal for you, right? So what happens when you make below $1,000? All of a sudden, you're going to be worried. There's something going wrong because it is out of the baseline. It's out of the normal range. If the sales goes above $3,000, you're going to be excited, but you're also going to be worried because something is changing in my business. My business is performing better than normal. What's happening? Am I getting new customers? Is somebody buying more? Is it a mistake? Did I make money from somewhere that I don't know? So you need to know what your baseline is. And I'm still going to talk to you about why that baseline is important, because imagine you've run your business for 2 years, and over that 2 years, on the average, on a good day, you make between $1,000 and $3,000. All of a sudden, you have to go somewhere, you have to travel, and you hire a manager, and the person is running the business for 3 months. And then you are noticing that the sales are dropping below $1,000. Clearly, something is wrong. But imagine if you didn't know your normal range. Imagine you didn't know your baseline. What that means is that if the guy tells you that today we made a sale of $600, you're going to say, okay, there is nothing to compare it against. That's why a baseline is important. And like I said, one good way to find out what your baseline is based on the historical performance of your business. If you've had a business that's operated for some time, you should have a sense of what your baselines are in terms of your sales, in terms of your gross margin, what you typically spend, your operating costs, what your profits would normally be. You need to understand what these baselines are because the baselines are important. Another way to establish a baseline is to track, or more or less compare your business to another benchmark. That could be, for example, if you have a business that has different branches, based on the performance of one branch, you can you can use it as a baseline for your other branches, especially if they are selling the same things and they are in a location where sales should not be a problem and stuff like that. So essentially, you can compare one of your branches against another branch. And I'm going to share, more on this because sometimes it may not be that straightforward. But if you're in a business where you have different branches, different locations, different divisions, different departments, you can actually use them as a baseline to compare one another. And of course, it can't just be your own business. Your competitor too can be a baseline. If you have access to the performance data of your competitors, that can be a baseline because if your competitor is performing at a certain level and the competitor sells the same thing that you sell, then you should be able to compare with the competitor. And sometimes you may not have access to your competitors' information, but sometimes you may have access to industry averages. There are things that are called industry averages, where in an industry, you expect that 40% of your sales or revenues will go to your operating costs. That's the industry average, the average of what everybody in your business is doing. For some industries, this kind of information is available on the internet. For some of them, you may need to do some market research to find out what the industry average is. But you need to have a baseline. And these are some ideas. These are some ways you can get that baseline. And then when you've run the business by yourself for some time, like I mentioned before, you can use that historical performance to gauge the baseline for the business. So don't forget, the first step of understanding the vital signs of your business is to have a baseline. And I already explained why a baseline is important. I use the analogy of what happens in the hospital when you go to see a doctor. They are taking your vital signs because they know what the baseline is. The human body has a certain temperature range, has a certain blood pressure range, has a certain weight range. Even when they do your blood tests, if you look at your results on your blood test, for every single thing, they are comparing the result from your test to the expected range. So that's why a baseline is always important, because without a baseline, there is nothing you can compare against. When you don't have something to compare against, you can't really say if the performance of your business is improving or is going bad. You can't really say that. If you're saying that, then that might just be maybe coming from your gut or an assumption. But to make it factual, you need to have a baseline that you can compare the performance of your business against. So that's it. Step number one, establish a baseline. Now, the second step in understanding the vital signs of your business so that you know if your business is actually running well, especially when you're not around, is to keep an eye on activity, right? Every business is more or less a concentration of activity, and there are different kinds of activity. A customer is buying from you, that's an activity. A supplier is supplying you the products that you sell, that's an activity. You are paying the supplier, that's an activity. You are pushing your products to your distributor, that's an activity. Your distributor is paying you, that's an activity. Your employees come to work, that's an activity. You pay your employees a salary, that's an activity. So your business is full of all kinds of activities that are going on every single day, right? So one thing that happens when you are not around as the owner of the business is that some activities suffer. And when those activities suffer, that instantly tells you that something is wrong. Because when you're around, there's a certain level of activity to expect in terms of sales, people coming to work, people getting paid, you getting paid and stuff like that. But then when you're not around, some of these activities start to reduce or increase or suffer. So you need to keep your eye on the activities. And by activities, like I just explained, An activity, if I had to define it, would be these are things that should be done in your business. Those are activities. So when you're not around in your business, are the things that should be done, are they getting done? That's one key question that needs to be answered when you are away from your business. Are the things that should be done getting done? So our sales coming in, our customers coming in, our customers being served, because that's a very important activity in your business. That's the main activity that brings money into your business. When customers come and they buy something and they pay you. So that activity is very important. Our suppliers getting paid, our suppliers delivering the goods, either the finished goods or the raw materials. Your employees, are they coming to work? Are their salaries being paid? Are your bills being paid? Things like your water bill, internet bill, logistics bill, all those bills that normally would be paid. Are they getting paid? And why activities are important is that if I give you a certain example, one crucial activity, like I just said, is customers getting served. Your business is making sales, you're serving customers. If that activity drops, what it means is that it will affect the amount of money you make in sales. It will affect your revenue. So that's a very critical question you need to answer. And another reason why that activity is important is if the activity is happening, but the results are not showing. So what I mean is there is evidence that customers are coming to the business. There's evidence that customers are paying for what they are buying. But when you look at the bank account of the company, you are not seeing the money there. Something is off. The activity is happening, but the results are not showing, right? So when you see, for example, in some activity in your financial statement or from your bank statement that your employees were paid, that's something you're seeing in your bank statement. That's an activity. But then when you're not around, you notice that your employees are not coming to work. There's something that's good. Something is off because they are being paid to work, but they are not showing up for work. So something is wrong. You need to go find out what is wrong. It could be that they are taking advantage of your absence and they are not coming to work, but truly they were paid. Or it could actually be that your manager took that money and pocketed it and didn't pay the staff. And then out of anger or more or less their own way to protest, they stop coming to work. So the activity will always tell you that something is going wrong. You need to pay attention to the activity. But then the big question is, how do you follow activity when you're not around? When you're not around to see the customers coming in or to see the employees coming to work or to sign the checks for your suppliers to be paid, to sign the checks for your employees to be paid, how can you be sure that these activities are happening when you're not available? Now, every activity leaves clues. It's like when you walk on sand, there are footprints. So every activity has a footprint. And I can give you a couple of examples. Like I told you, the evidence of the activity that customers are coming to your business, the footprint is that money should be in your account because your customers pay you, right? If your suppliers are being paid, the evidence will be that they are not going to be disturbing you or protesting, So every activity will leave a footprint. So when you are not available in your business, you need to be looking for the footprints. And the footprints are the evidence of the activity. So I can mention a couple of them. One key footprint is inflows into your bank account. If you're away from your business, you should have a way of knowing when money gets into your bank account. These days, things are very modern. You can either get a text message that shows that money has left the account or money has come in, or you can get an email from your bank to show you that money just left or money came in, or you may have an app. Most banks now have a mobile app on your phone. You can log into the app and check the activity. Or you can go on the website of the bank and log into your account and see if there's activity. So the evidence will be that if customers are coming to your business and they are buying stuff, which is an activity, the evidence, the footprint of that activity is that you should be seeing money coming into your bank account. If money is not coming into your bank account, there's a problem. Another footprint is that your suppliers need to be paid. If they've been supplying to your business, they need to be paid. So if you're not getting alerts for your suppliers being paid, and your manager is telling you that he's on top of it or she's on top of it, but you're not seeing the movement from the bank account, then you know that something is wrong. Why are your suppliers not being paid? Because that could affect business. Because if you don't pay your suppliers on time, they may not take you seriously. And then when they don't supply you in time, it will affect your business because You might be suffering stockouts. Your customers come, the products are not available. It's bad for your reputation and stuff like that. So every activity will leave a footprint. Another common footprint is documents. Documents are very important. Examples of documents, receipts. If your business buys something, there should be a receipt. Invoices. If your business sells something, there should be an invoice. Vouchers. All these things are footprints. They are evidence of activity. And when you are not available, when you are not around, you need to be looking at the footprints. You need to be very persistent. I've not seen the receipts for this. I've not seen the invoice for this. I've not seen, and if your business is such where you're taking advantage of technology, there should be some portal where you log in, or you may be getting emails or stuff like that, and you can catch up with what is happening. Every activity must have a footprint. Any activity that doesn't have a footprint is suspect. It means that there's something going wrong, right? Another common evidence, another common footprint is communications, right? Even though you are not available in the business, emails should be exchanged. You should insist on that. It's not because if your business only does verbal conversation where your manager talks to your accountant and that is gone, you are not part of that activity. And that is wrong for you because you can't see the footprint. But if they put it in an email, if the manager says what he wants to say to the accountant in an email, you are going to see that. If they put it in the company, in the WhatsApp group, in the management WhatsApp group, you are going to see that footprint. If they put it in the messaging app or wherever it is that you use for running your business in terms of communications, you are going to be in the loop. So you are not getting in the way of the manager's job or the accountant's job or the purchasing manager's job. You're not getting in their way, but you want to be seeing the footprints because the footprints are the evidence that activities are going on. So that's when you're not away from your business, whether you are studying abroad in the US or Europe, whether you traveled on vacation to Dubai, I'm sure you're going to go with your mobile phone. And all it takes is you go in there, look at the emails, you're seeing what is happening. Okay, this person is talking to this person. That is the footprint. You're just keeping your eyes on the footprint to be sure that the engine is rolling. Because if you are not seeing the footprint, what it instantly tells you is that the activities are not happening. And if the activities are not happening, that's a problem. You see? So that's a very important thing. Another common footprint you need to insist on when you are not present, when you're not physically available to run your business, is reports, activity reports. And these activity reports, they could be daily reports, they could be weekly reports. So they give you the reports based on what you're asking for the week, how much sales were made, what was spent, what was the attendance, how many people came to work. Is there any very important thing that needs my attention? Is there any decision that needs to be made? Is there anything that needs to be approved? Activity reports are very important, and you need to make it a discipline in your business, especially when you're not physically around, right? So when an entrepreneur is physically available in their business, I can excuse that you're not asking for reports, even though that is not like proper practice. But when you're physically available, it may be okay that you don't have reports. But when you are not around, it is particularly important that you see these reports, because the reports provide evidence. Because what it means is that when somebody submits a report, that's a reference. It's a reference point. It's actually a baseline on its own. Because the person may forget what they've written and they may say something else later. But you can always dig into that email and dig up that report and say, you're saying this now, but this is what you sent to me. You told me that in January, we made sales of $10,000. Why are you saying now that it is $6,000? That's what you sent to me, right? So those footprints are very, very important. They are your best friend when you're not physically available to monitor what's going on in your business, right? So like I mentioned earlier, when you put your eyes on the activity, they tell you a lot, even though you're not physically running the business, because information is power. And that's exactly what activities do. Activities are happening, and as they're happening, they're leaving footprints, they're leaving evidence. You are looking at the evidence, because the evidence tells you that, okay, I may not physically be around, but okay, something is happening. But when you are away from your business and the activity is weak or the activity is delayed, by delayed, I mean, when things that should be done are not being done when they should be done, that's a problem. That's a red flag. Or when an activity that should be done is not done, that's an absent activity. These are things that deviate from the baseline, and they should trigger a red flag that you need to look into immediately. Because if you let one activity drop and you do not do anything about it, you do not intervene, more activities are going to drop because you are sending the wrong message. You are sending the message that it is okay to not do these activities when I am not around. Meanwhile, the message you should be sending is, whether I am around or not around, as a business, we must do these things, right? So very important that your activities are running the way they should run when you are around. They shouldn't change when you're not around. And if they change, you need to have a way to know. And how will you know? You know for the footprints. You will know from the evidence. And I just shared with you what some of those evidence can be. So that's it for the second step. Keep your eyes on the activity. That is how you understand the pulse of your business and the vital signs. Now, let's move on to step 3. Remember, I told you there are 5 steps I want to discuss with you. Now, the third step is to analyze the performance of your business for gaps, right? So you are getting all this information from the footprints that the activities in your business are leaving. You are seeing the emails, you're getting copied, you are seeing the WhatsApp chats, you're seeing your people talk to themselves, so you're seeing what's happening. You're getting the reports. You're getting the daily report or the weekly report or the monthly report, right? Now, these reports should not just sit in your email box or on your shelf or somewhere. Because the thing is, if you ask people to send you reports and you are not doing anything with those reports, human beings are very clever creatures, right? The people on the ground are going to sense that this is just a motion that you have to go through. You just submit reports on Friday and nothing is going to happen because they know you are not reading them. They know you are not looking at them. So they can easily get away with murder because they know that, they send the reports, they do what they're supposed to do, but the boss is not looking at these reports. They will know because they too may be conscious of some mistakes they have made or some things they are trying to hide or things they should have done but didn't do. And then they submitted the report, or the footprints happened. You saw it in your bank statement, you saw it in the email, you saw it in the WhatsApp chat, and you did not do anything, you did not flag anything, you didn't say anything. They are going to take note of that behavior. And they are going to see you as somebody who just asks for activity stuff, for reports, who just asks to be copied in emails, but he doesn't do anything about it. He just assumes that things are running. And that is not good for you because you need to let them know that even though you are not around, you are present in that business. Your eyes and your ears are there. That's the only way the business will run, as if you are present. So what I mean by analyzing the performance for gaps is that let's look at the current performance of your business. We're talking about things like sales, turnover, right? So that's one example. If you're asking for the vital signs of your business, it's very likely that one vital sign you'll be interested in is sales or turnover. How much did we make today? How many products did we sell today? How many customers did we serve today? That's a very important performance metric that anybody who has a business will be interested in, sales or turnover, right? Another one is profitability. So of all the monies we got from our customers, how much of it did we keep? So, and that's talking about profitability. And profitability can be in 3 main categories. I've talked about this in the previous episode. There's your gross margin, which is a measure of profitability. There's your operating profit, your operating margin. It's a measure of profitability. And then there's your net profit. These are 3 different kinds of profits. And they tell you 3 different things about your business. Very important, vital signs. Your gross profit tells you something about your business. Your operating profit, your operating margin tells you something about your business. Your net profit margin tells you something about your business. So you should be able to look at these performances, right? Another is your cost efficiency. Are you wasting money? Are you spending on things you shouldn't spend on? Or are you paying too much for things you should be paying for? Because that's one common way that money can leak from your business. You might be making money from sales, but one common way that fraud can happen in a business is to spend money that doesn't need to be spent, that only need to be spent, or to overspend money. Those are 2 common areas that money can be stolen from a business. So you need to be watching your cost efficiency. Are we spending on things that we should be spending on? And then if we're spending on things we should be spending on, are we spending more than we should be spending? Cost efficiency, very important. Another critical area is cash flow management. Because the tricky thing in business is that sales does not equal cash. Profits does not always equal cash. So on paper, it could be that your business is making money, but then in terms of cash flow, things are wrong. And one common way could be if you pay your suppliers earlier than you should pay them, it's going to affect your cash flow. If you don't, if some of your customers buy products or they get services on credit, if they don't pay as soon as they should pay, maybe if they normally pay within 7 days or 14 days, and then the thing drops to 21 days or 30 days, it's going to affect your cash flow management, your cash management. So that's why monitoring the activities are very important, right? Your cash flow management, very important. Things like your inventory turnover, right? How long your products are staying on your shelves can affect your cash. How well are you receiving money for people from your customers who buy on credit? Very important. How are you paying your suppliers? If you pay them earlier than usual, if you pay them later than usual, it's going to affect your cash flow. So these are very important things you need to look at. Another important area is leverage. What's the level of debt in your business, right? Is it that when you're not around, your business is taking advantage of loans, or is there something shady happening around the capital structure of your business that you're not aware of? These are very important things that you need to look at. But all these things I've talked about are in terms of your current performance of your business. So if you get the activity reports at the end of the month, it's going to tell you something about your sales, your profits, how well you were able to manage costs, your cash, and your leverage. That's just a snapshot. That's just the performance of the business currently. And when you look at the current performance of your business, it doesn't tell you a lot. It might just make you happy or sad at that moment, but it doesn't tell you a lot. That's why measuring the relative performance of your business is very important. So you don't just look at the performance of this month. You want to compare this month to what we did last month. You want to compare this month to the average of the last 6 months. You want to compare this month to this month last year. So more or less, if we made sales in March this year, how well does the sales of March this year compared to the sales of March last year? That relative performance would let you know of some gaps that ordinarily may not occur to you. So measuring relative performance of the business, you can measure the business against itself. So you can measure your week-to-week performance, month-to-month performance, year-to-year performance, very important. But there's also another interesting area of relative performance that you can measure. And this relates to what I talked about earlier, where you have a business that has different branches. Let's imagine you have a supermarket chain, right? You have a supermarket chain and you have 4 locations of your supermarket in different parts of the city, right? But the interesting thing is that all these supermarkets are in different parts of the city and they are different sizes. So one supermarket is maybe 200 square meters, employs 44 people. Another location of your supermarket is half that size. And the other location of your business is 2 times the size of the first one. So they are different sizes. So the conundrum, the difficulty here is, how do you measure a business with another business of a different size? So if you have a business that more or less does the same thing, but they are not the same size as another business, how can you measure the 2 businesses to be sure that they are pulling their weight? So I'll give you a couple of examples, and let me use retail, for example. The supermarket example I talked about. If I'm looking at relative performance, I'll be interested in something like sales per square meter. So it will be unfair for me to compare the sales of one location versus another location because they are not the same size. It will be unfair for me to compare the sales. But if I look at their sales per square meter, that can tell me how efficiently they are making sales. Because by the time I look at sales per square meter, it might surprise you that the smaller branch is making more money than the bigger branch. Because by the time you do the sales per square meter, it then tells you, how well they are pulling their weight. And sometimes it can lead you to some very interesting revelations where a smaller branch, a smaller location, a smaller department may actually be doing better, far better than the bigger one. I would also want to look at sales per employee. So one business is making sales of $100,000 and is hiring 55 people. Another business is making sales of $50,000, but it's hiring only 10 people. By the time you do the sales per employee, you will find out that even though the second location is making smaller sales than the first one, by the time you compare it to the number of employees it has, you see that it's doing much better. So what it tells me is that the employees in the bigger business is either they are overstaffed because the employees are not pulling their weight. It's likely they are overstaffed. Maybe they've hired more people than they should. So 2 people are doing the job of 1 person. That's what it's telling me. Because I'm looking at the efficiency ratios and it's telling me some very interesting things. I can also measure the average salary per employee. I know employees are paid different salaries, but if I look at the total salary and divide it by the total number of employees, it tells me if one location is overpaying their people compared to another location. And it may be the manager taking most of the money or some of the other staff taking most of the money. But bottom line is that efficiency ratio tells me a whole lot about how well that business is managing its costs. And these are just some interesting ways you can get information without even being there. And you're doing all these things based on what they are feeding you. And it can be very powerful, right? So it's very important that you don't just receive the evidence. You don't just take the reports. You don't just see the messages in email and all that. You don't just take all that information and not do anything about it. When you are away from your business, your biggest power is information. Information is literally power when you're away from your business. But that information will count for nothing if you don't do anything with the information. So it's very important that you analyze the information you are getting, get those insights, and then we move on to the next step, which I'm going to talk about, because you need to act on the information you're getting. The 4th step is to trust but verify. You are getting all this information about activity in your business. You are getting the reports, right? There is a temptation to think that what they are sending you in the reports or the evidence that you are seeing, the receipts you are seeing, the invoices you are seeing, the vouchers you're seeing, that all those things are true, that they are real. I don't want you to be schizophrenic here, right? I don't want you to always look or feel like you cannot trust your people or you cannot trust your employees. By all means, you need to, if you want people to trust you, you have to show that you're willing to trust them. After all, you wouldn't leave your business in the hands of other people if there was no level of trust. So I'm not saying you shouldn't trust people, but the problem is that trust on its own is not enough. It's unfortunate, but as long as you're dealing with human beings, trust alone is not enough. We're running a business here, right? It's not a religion or some sociocultural group. It's a business. And if it's a business, we have to do things properly. So yes, I trust my employees. I trust my business partner. I trust the co-founders. But you need to verify. You see, you trust, but you verify. I learned this principle very early on in my career when I worked in audits and accounting, right? They always tell you, when you're an auditor, you don't just believe everything they tell you. Yes, you will trust that the person is not lying to you. You want to believe you're in a professional environment where people are saying the truth, but you need to verify, right? So you trust, but you verify. And what I mean is that verification is an important control that builds trust. When you verify what somebody has told you and it comes out as true, it increases the trust you have for that person, because what the person has told you has just checked out. But what if that thing the person has told you, when you try to verify it, it was a lie? Guess what? That trust will crumble. But the only way you were able to test the trust was because you were trying to verify. So verification is not inimical to trust. Verification is not harmful to trust. Verification actually enhances trust, because that's how we can prove that the trust exists. So when you get all these things, you need to be able to verify. And I can give you some very practical examples, right? One thing I would want to verify is, okay, I'm seeing that sales are happening. I'm seeing that customers are buying. I'm seeing the money in the bank account. But are my customers satisfied? Are they getting value for money? Are they as well served as they would have been if I was present in the business? If you, the owner of the business, were present, are they getting the same quality of service they would have gotten if you're around? So how do we verify that? Your manager can tell you, sir, there's no problem. The customers are smiling. Everything is happening well. Your head of customer service can tell you, sir, you don't need to worry, right? Madam, you don't need to worry. The customers are very happy. They've even been asking about you. We told them you traveled. Everything is fine, right? You can trust all those things they are telling you, but you need to verify. And one common way would be that if you know your customers and you know the ones that have bought something recently, you can reach out to them. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can reach out to them on a courtesy, sir, I haven't heard from you in a while. I trust things are okay. I hope you've been satisfied with our services lately. That is a crucial source of feedback. Your customers, by cutting out the middleman, and the middleman in this case would be the people you left behind to run the business. By cutting out the middleman, you can hear directly from the customers to know what quality of service they got. And if they are satisfied with the service, you can just more or less, I'm just checking in to know how you're doing and stuff like that. And that way, if something is wrong, if there's something going on that has been hidden from you, you're going to hear about it. So you're not calling all your customers, just a couple of them. There's a technique called sampling, right? And it is very relevant in statistics. When you have a pool of data, you have 100 customers or 200 customers. I don't expect you to be calling 200 customers while you're on vacation. That's not proper. But you can call 5 of them randomly, any random 5. You call any random 5. If out of those 5, everything is okay, then you have a reasonable level of confidence that what your guys are telling you is true. But if out of the 5 you called, 3 of them are complaining or 4 of them are complaining, then there's something wrong. Especially when these people you called, you randomly just selected them from your customer list. It shows that there's something wrong. So you need to check in. Another way you can verify, you can reach out to one of your important strategic suppliers and say, well, sir, it's been a while, Thank you for, we really appreciate your business. I hope everything is fine. I hope you're satisfied with how we're paying you and stuff like that. If something is wrong, that supplier will talk. The supplier is going to say something. And that will be very valuable information because remember what I said, verification helps to build trust. It doesn't destroy it. It just verifies the trust. If what you're telling me is true, when I try to verify it, it should check out. And there's nothing wrong with that. Are your employees being paid? There has to be a channel for employees to complain. There needs to be some whistleblower channel through which employees can complain anonymously and they will not get punished for it, right? So it's very, very important that you pay close attention to the way these things are run. So that's one way you can look at it. When you try to verify, it will help to enhance the trust that you're actually trying to build, right? Another common one is the money in the bank. Is it actually all of the money that should be in the bank? So there's this thing called bank reconciliation, where you compare how much money the business has on its books with what has come into the account or left the bank account. You do a bank reconciliation. There's nothing wrong with it. If everybody has been doing their job, it should check out. We should be able to account for all the money. But if something is wrong, it will show. So the 4th step, like I just explained, is trust but verify. And the thing is, these examples I've given you are very practical. You don't need to travel. You don't need to end your vacation. You don't need to end your studies. You don't need to terminate your travel. You can do these things from wherever it is that you are. Another common one would be periodic and unpredictable audits. There are things called spot checks. So if you have, you can talk to your accountant, the person who does your books for your company. If the person is a third party, so maybe you have an accounting firm or a chartered accountant or a professional accountant who is a third party, they offer these services where they can just show up at any of your locations and do a spot check. They can show up and look at the inventory list and say, okay, I want to see this item. And then they go and then they count and they are sure that what is in the records is actually what is inside the warehouse. Because there have been very shocking cases where on the record, on the evidence, it says that we have products in the warehouse, on paper, in the records. But by the time you go to the warehouse, there are no goods in the warehouse. So they have been stealing the goods in the warehouse, but you have been getting reports on paper that everything is okay. So that's why it's important to trust but verify. You trust the report they've given you, but then your accountant shows up or whoever it is that you hire including yourself, you can show up and say, I want to do a spot check. I want to see this item. You bring it out, they count it. It's all complete. Okay. It aligns with what we have in the record. I want to see that item. They bring it out, you count. Those are ways that if anybody even had any plans of stealing or doing anything fraudulent, because they cannot predict when you're going to do a spot check, it is not worth the risk, right? So when people steal, many times it's not because they are professional thieves. It's because there is an opportunity. And that opportunity happens when they are writing reports, but the reports don't rhyme with reality. You can actually write a report and submit it and be stealing the goods in the warehouse and nobody will know. So that's why it's very important. Like they say, opportunity makes a thief. You cannot afford to allow opportunities that would give people the incentive or motivation to want to take advantage of your business. So you can do inventory counts, you can do spot checks, you can look at employee attendance at work, the cleanliness of the office and a couple of things like that. So these are very important and practical things that you can do that can really help. So that's it for the fourth point, trust but verify. The fifth and final step I want to talk about is reward and punishment, right? So if you're away from your business, it's either one of three things will happen. The first is that when you're not around in your business, that things run the way they should run. That things are normal. That's one possibility. The second possibility is that you leave your business in the hands of a manager, a business partner, a co-founder, and things improve in your absence. You actually leave the business and things actually improve in your absence. That's a possibility. Another possibility, which is a worst case scenario, is that you leave the business in the hands of somebody else and the business performs worse than when you were around. These are the three possibilities, right? So what we want to do is we want to give people the incentive to give us the performance that we want. And the performance that we want is, at the minimum, things should be normal, at the minimum. But optimally, things should improve. That I'm not around does not mean that the business should just stay the way it's always been. There should be an incentive if people can improve the performance of your business. So that's why reward is very important. When the business improves, you need to be able to reward people. But remember what I said. How do you know if the business has improved if you don't have a baseline? So you say the baseline is coming in again. You need to have a baseline, something you can compare the business against, because that then tells you that these guys have improved. Also, if the business goes worse than it was when you were managing that business, when you were around, there should be consequences. There should be a punishment for that, right? Essentially, these are important principles, and you need to let your people know, whether it's your manager, your management team, your employees, your business partner, you need to have these principles, that there should be consequences for action and performance. If you do the right things, you need to be rewarded. If you perform well, you need to be rewarded. If you perform badly and you don't do the right things, there has to be punishment for it, right? And there also has to be a principle of responsibility and accountability. People have to be ready to take the consequences of their actions, the consequences of their decisions, the consequences of their performance. That accountability is very important. And then there's a team spirit. And I need you to pay attention to this one, because this is an important point. You don't want a situation where somebody says, when you were not around, I did my job, but this other person did not do their job. So you want to make it clear that there is a sense of team spirit. And by team spirit, what I mean is the team rises together or sinks together. There is no individual, I'm just doing my own job. So what if one person does their job well and another person does a terrible job? And in all, the business suffers. So the sales were making drops. And even though the sales have dropped, one employee is saying they did everything they were supposed to do. They did their job. That's not enough. Doing your job is not enough. What we want is for the business to thrive. What we want is for the business to succeed. So you need to hammer it there. The team spirit, very important. So these things are important if you're going to build a strong culture for your business, because the culture is what keeps your business in check when you're not around. when you're not around, it's the culture that keeps the business in check. So that culture is very important. And the culture comes from knowing that there are consequences for good behavior and there are consequences for bad behavior. You should always be very clear to your people at all times. And then when it comes to rewards, how do you actually reward your people? You see, sometimes it's not always all about money. Yeah, the money is important, but sometimes it may not be enough. And what do I mean? There are non-financial things that you can do that can go a long way and may even be perceived to have higher value than money that you give somebody who performs well. One common example is praise and recognition. When you recognize performance, that somebody has done well, if you recognize that person openly, you praise that person. For some people, that is worth its weight in gold. You need to be able to praise your people who do well. Recognize them. Let other people know. Let the whole company know that, this guy is doing well in his position, in what he's doing. So, and that is important because you are reinforcing good behavior. When you reinforce good behavior, other people pay attention and other people want to copy, that behavior. So if this guy was rewarded, if this guy was praised for good behavior, for performing well, I think I also want to be praised. So I'm going to perform well. So you need to reinforce the behavior that you want. So praise and recognition is one common way. It may not cost you anything. It doesn't cost you anything to recognize good performance. Another one is perks. Sometimes it could just be that a person has their own parking space, or they have their own office space, or they have access to a certain club or group or something, or you are paying for a vacation for them, or they will have access to insurance, medical insurance of a certain level. These are just some perks that people who perform well can get, and then it does a lot to push them and motivate them and reinforce that behavior in your company. Another two is titles. Titles are very powerful. When you promote somebody or give them a leadership position because they have done well, they move from being a team player to being a team leader. They move from being an ordinary employee to being a supervisor or a manager. That is in fact, I've seen situations where somebody was promoted from their previous position to supervisor. The salary did not change. This did not come with some pay rise or bump in pay, right? The only thing that changed for this guy was the title. But the impact was amazing. That's newfound respect, the symbolism of the title. I'm now supervisor. He carried it with pride, and you would have thought this guy was given $1 million. So for some people, it's like that. Titles and giving them a position of leadership, a position to lead their peers or lead other people, it can perform wonders. And if you notice, most of the things I've talked about here, most of them don't require money, right? And then you come to the point of promotion. Of course, you can promote with pay. You can pay bonuses. You can increase the person's pay. You can give the person a part of profits at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter or whenever. So these are some little things that can go very far in motivating your people to give you the performance that you want, especially when you're not around. And then I have to talk about punishment. When you find that the activities that are supposed to be going on are not happening, or somebody is not playing their part, or somebody is behaving badly, you need to set an example. You need to show that such things are not acceptable in the business. And people need to know. Because when you set an example, nobody wants to be like that, right? So, but there are a wide range of ways you can punish. One of the simple ones is to rebuke. And of course, when you're rebuking somebody, most times I personally advocate, if it's a first-time offender, you rebuke in private, right? At least you can save the person's face, save the person's respect. This could just be a conversation you have over the phone or in an email, letting the person know that, you are disappointed in this performance, or you are disappointed by this behavior that they exhibited, or you are disappointed by this thing that they did, and you cannot understand why they would do it. More or less, you try to hear from the other side without just giving a one-way rebuke. But there are ways you can rebuke in such a way that if there is something wrong or if there is a way you can help, the person can come back and let you know that, this is why this thing happened. Rebuking somebody is one way, is a form of punishment. Fines are another way. Somebody doesn't show up for work. Somebody damages company property. Somebody makes the company lose money. The person needs to be financially culpable for that. If not, other people are going to break company stuff. Other people are going to cause the company to lose money because they saw somebody else get away with it. So they may as well try it, right? So these are things you need to enforce so that people know that there are consequences for bad behavior, for bad actions, and for bad decisions. Another one is a pay cut, right? Somebody is not performing at their level. They may choose to take a pay cut or take a demotion, come down to a lower level. All of these are measures you can put in place before you actually sack somebody, because you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. Or maybe you're giving them 3 strikes. The person does the first time, you rebuke the person. The person does it the second time, you fine the person, or there's a pay cut or there's a demotion. The next time they do something, it may be a suspension or an outright termination. You sack the person, right? So you need to show all these things so that it is obvious that you are being fair. It's not as if you are punishing without understanding what's going on. You're trying to be fair. But of course, these things depend on the severity of what the person has done. If it's somebody who has stolen company money, fraud, right? You should actually involve the police because that's a far more serious offense, right? Compared to somebody who maybe didn't show up at work or didn't do their work well or something like that. So, of course, in these things, you have to apply wisdom. You need to apply the proper judgment. So we've covered quite a lot in this episode, and I'm glad I focused on this topic in this episode because there are a lot of interesting nuggets you can pull out from this episode. So at this point in the episode, let's recap. I started this episode by talking about the common reasons why a person may be away from their business for either a short period or an extended period. It could range from you have different locations, or you need to travel, or for some reason you're not available in your business. How can you be sure that things are running well? And then I use the analogy of vital signs. You walk into a hospital, it's unlikely you will directly see the doctor. There is a nurse that will likely attend to you and will take your vital signs, your temperature, your blood pressure, your weight, other things, right? And these are important markers because before the body fails, before the body goes down in sickness, there are usually signs. And that's why the doctor will want to know your vital signs before you actually see them. And I use that example in business. It's very rare that a business will fail without showing you the vital signs, without showing you signs. There will be signs beforehand, before a business enters crisis mode. The problem is that many people don't know how to read the vital signs. And I'm hoping I've achieved that with this episode. Now you know the things you should be looking for. And then I talked about the 5 specific steps you can take to understand your vital signs and to act on the vital signs. The first step is to establish a baseline. The second step is to keep an eye on activity. And then the third step is to analyze the performance for gaps. And then the fourth step I talked about is to trust but verify. So it's very important. And then the fifth step I talked about is to reward and punish. So at this point in the episode, we'll talk about our partners, Kweza. Kweza is an interesting platform that is opening the doors of opportunity to small and mid-sized businesses on the African continent. If you sell products and you are limiting the scope of your customer base to your country or your city or your town, you are severely limiting the potential of your business. Because with a platform like Kweza, you can access customers in other countries, other African countries, and even customers outside of Africa, in markets like the US, Canada, Europe, and the Middle East. So join other very excited entrepreneurs and business owners who are expanding the reach of their customer base via the Kweza platform. So there are 2 apps for Kweza. If you are a seller, if you sell products and you're looking to expand the reach of your products, you download the Kweza seller app. It's Kweza, Kuueza. And if you want to explore the range of interesting products that are available on Kweza, there's a separate app for that. It's called the Kweza user app. So at this point in the episode, there are 4 things I need you to consider. The first is to join the Insiders program, right? The quality of information you get on this podcast is directly inspired by the entrepreneurs that work and I work directly with. These are entrepreneurs in over 20 plus African countries. They are different stages of business. Some of them are still at the idea stage. Some of them are startups. Some of them are growing businesses. Some of them are mature businesses. And these are the interesting conversations I have with them on a daily and weekly basis. So this conversation was inspired by an entrepreneur who is about to leave his business to go for an education program in the UK. And the question is, how does he keep things running while he's away, right? So if you want to gain direct impact, if you want to learn from other entrepreneurs who are building interesting businesses, join the Insiders program. To learn more about the Insiders, you can check us out at smallstarter.com, smallstarter.com/insiders. The second thing I need you to do is to tell your friends about this podcast. This is very practical stuff. This is beyond theory. This is coming directly from the front lines, right? So tell your friends about the Small Starter Business Podcast. They can find us on Google. Just Google the Small Starter Business Podcast, and we're right there on number one. The third thing I want you to do is to give us a pat on the back by giving us a 5-star review. If you've been listening to the podcast and you like what you hear, giving us a 5-star review, I think, would be a very nice way to say thank you. But if you're not there yet, I think you should give us the benefit of the doubt. Listen to our previous episodes. Listen to the other episodes I'm going to release in the future. And when you're ready, a 5-star review will really be nice as a thank you. And I appreciate you in advance for that. So to leave us a review, you can do that at smallstarter.com/review, or you can do it on whatever app you're listening to this podcast on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, or whichever ones, right? So again, I'm active on social media. On LinkedIn, I have almost 800,000 followers. And when I have the time, I often post stuff there. We also have a group on Facebook. Now, these are activities on social media. The Insiders remains the core group of people that I'm devoted to. These are the people I support as they are trying to achieve the ambitions and visions in business. And I hope you get to become our newest insider. So whether you're trying to solve a sales problem in your business, or you're trying to raise money for your business, or you're having trouble with attracting talent or keeping bright people in your business, or you're trying to structure your business, improve your operations, whatever the problem is, we're dealing with it in the Insiders. So check us out at smallstarter.com/insiders. So to round off today's, to round off this episode, I think I'm going to round off with what I started with. I said that some entrepreneurs try to build a business, but they unwittingly create a job for themselves. So some people say they're entrepreneurs, but they're actually self-employed. And how do you know a self-employed person? The moment they step out of their business, everything crashes. There's no sales coming in. Suppliers are not being paid. Nothing is happening because the owner of the business is not available. If this is the kind of business you have, unfortunately, I don't mean to be rude, you don't have a business. You're just self-employed. What a business is a business is a machine. A business is an engine. You know the way an engine works. The moment you turn the key and the engine starts, you don't need to be around to push anything around or turn anything, or the engine just keeps working. As long as there's fuel in that engine, as long as there's oil in that engine, it's going to keep working. That's exactly what a business is. So I'm hoping you're on your way to building a business, building something that can work in your absence. And while you are absent from your business, I hope that you're going to learn from this episode the vital signs that you can use to give yourself the confidence that your engine is running the way it should. Until the very next episode, I can't wait to impact you with much more business knowledge. Take care of yourself. Be safe. Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Small Starter Business Podcast. To take our free business courses or join one of our signature programs for special entrepreneurs like you, head over to smallstarter.com to join our private community. See you inside.